My name's Taylor Wilkins. This is my father. Well, I'm Taylor Wilkins III. This is my father, Taylor Wilkins Jr. He also goes by Red. And Dad, what I want to pose, the questions I want to pose to you is about our family and when they came over from the Pensacola area and when they got into the county and what all they did.
That was around right after 1700. They came down to Blakely, and they lived down at Blakely, of course, until the yellow fever wiped it out down there. But it was around just after 1700s.
Right. I think George Washington Wilkins was born when, 1806, who's buried down there. Our family's buried across the street from Blakely Park in Saluda Cemetery.
Yeah.
And then they came there, after living there, then they moved up here to North Baldwin to Bay Minette.
That's right. And been here ever since in Bay Minette.
And growing up, you remembered your great-grandfather. He also went by Red.
Yeah, he was sheriff, and then he became tax collector, and he served a long time as tax collector, and he died in office when he was tax collector.
And then your father became sheriff.
Right after World War II, he was in World War II, and he got injured in that Battle of the Bulge over in Germany. So he came back, stayed in the hospital in rehabilitation a long time down in Daytona Beach, Florida. And then he ran for sheriff and got elected around 1940, right about 1940.
Now, Grandpa served as sheriff for what, 28 years?
28 years, and he was
7 terms.
chief deputy before then.
And so, Grandpa saw an interesting cast of characters from Gulf Shores, was good friends with Mr. Snook, but, you know, had some interaction. You want to talk about the Dixie Mafia? And
well, they had some unfortunate people down in the low end of the county, and Daddy had to break all that up, and he did, and that was carried in the main magazines in the county where he had broken that up. They was tied in down in Cuba and hauling guns and everything else up this way. But he was a law and order man. He broke all that up and sent all them to prison.
Now, how about now when he so he was sheriff for 28 years, and he also was in getting the boys' ranch here.
Yeah, he started that boys' ranch. He went to Florida and Georgia and looked at their ranches, and then he was very instrumental in raising the money. He was the first president, and he was president of the Alabama Sheriff's Association when they built the boys' ranch, and then they built the second boys ranch down here. But that was a big thing with him, getting that boys ranch going.
He saw the need, yeah. Any other cases that stand out that he dealt with? He liked to bust moonshine stills.
Oh yeah, they always up the north end of the county and around. They had whiskey stills. He busted all them up, and he was a law and order man. And
that was a long ways from Little River, Alabama, to Perdita Key. That's a long ways.
Yeah, it's the largest county east of the Mississippi River, and I think he just had 5 deputies, and you had to go all the way to Fort Morgan. I remember a lot of nights he would get a call from something going on down in Gulf Shores or Fort Morgan or that way, and he'd always get up, put his clothes on, and even though he had deputies, he'd go down there himself.
Tell us about what, now you were born in
1940.
And tell us about growing up as a young kid in Bay Minette, and as far as your dad was sheriff and what the town looked like. And I know the train was of course the center of a lot of activity coming through town, and we had the old beautiful courthouse, but what kind of went on in Bay Minette, being of course a very heavy timber and then farming community surrounded, but what was Bay Minette like?
Well, it was just a good town to live in, and it wasn't that many people here, but we knew everybody, and it was just a good town to live in, and you knew everybody and that sort of thing.
And the train that came through here would go to Mobile, but it also would go to the south end of the county and hit the potato sheds, correct?
Right.
And then the produce flowed also through Bay Minette. Now, what was it like going to school? Now, one thing, you were born at home 5 blocks from where we are currently right here. And then, of course, you grew up, Grandpa being the sheriff, you grew up a lot in the jail.
Yeah, slept in the jail, ate in the jail from time to time. And, of course, we just walked to school, We walked pretty well wherever we went. You didn't have that many cars back then.
And now, was that a dirt road to school, or was that paved?
I believe that was a dirt road then, because I remember when they paved it. Now the road up to Stockton was a paved road, but wasn't many roads paved in Bay Minette, but they began to pave them.
And now at Bay Minette, you played what sports?
Well, I played football, basketball, and baseball. Sports was a big thing back then.
And who all did y'all play?
Well, we played Fairhope and Foley, Robertsdale, and W.S. Neal in Bruton, and T.R. Miller up there in Bruton, and Atmore, and Jackson, Alabama, and Chatham.
All right. And now, you graduated from Bay Minette High School, or did you go to Marion?
Yeah, I graduated from Bay Minette. I can't remember, I think it was 1958.
And then you were gone?
2 years up at Marion Institute, and then went on to Alabama for 3 years. Yeah, we had a good ball team. Of course, Coach Bryant, he'd just gotten to the university. I think my first year there was his second year. But anyway, my second year there, which would have been in 1961, we won the national championship. We were undefeated. Pat Trammell was our quarterback. And you mentioned Joe Namath. He was a freshman then, and freshmen couldn't play. He could practice and so forth. But Joe became a very good friend of mine. I talked with him on the telephone the other day. But anyway, we had a great team and won the national championship. My favorite memory was Coach Bryant was a tough coach. He was always fair, but he was a hard taskmaster. And it was a real pleasure to play on Saturdays in the games. They were a lot easier than the practices we had during the week. But we just had some country boys, mostly from Alabama. It wasn't like it is now, where they're from all over. Most all our players were from Alabama.
And then you went to law school?
At Cumberland Law School in Birmingham and part of Samford University. And so I went up there and graduated from law school, then went into service. And then I served a year in Vietnam and then got out, came home and started law practice. I've been practicing law about 53 years now.
Hey, Dad, when you came back and got out from Vietnam, and you came back, I think you and Mom bought the house back in '61, I believe, or '62, somewhere right in there on hand.
Yeah, I believe that was it. I'm trying to think.
It's about 6 blocks from here, and y'all renovated it and moved in. And how was practicing law, setting up your firm?
Well, wasn't a whole lot going on then. You had to work all week, work on Saturday to try to get enough groceries for the week. But it wasn't like it is now, where you have a lot of litigation. And back then, if you just draw a few wills and deeds and just have a little practice like that, it was pretty tough. We didn't have that many lawyers in the county, but I started handling cases in court and doing my career, and even a little bit today. I made my living over there in that courthouse, in that brick building.
And pushing that forward, you became a county attorney in the 80s, right?
I believe it was in the 80s. And I was county attorney for 7, 8, 9 years. And while I was county attorney, the thing that always stands out to me, of course, Baldwin County was really growing then, and people were moving in, but the Shell Oil Company wanted to drill out in the Gulf and in the bay and dump their drilling muds in the water. And of course they would flow up on the beaches, and of course we sued them, and it was a long litigation all the way through the Alabama Supreme Court. But the Lord blessed us, and Shell said, well, we're not going to drill for oil if you don't let us dump our waste, all that drilling mud and all that stuff in the bay, but we stuck with it. And of course, they drilled and had to haul all their drilling muds and chemicals back on and put them in the dumps and all.
Now, Dad, as you practice law, now you were fortunate too. My dad is was an avid quail hunter. You were able to hunt quail all over the county with your client, you know, some of your clients, laying on a lot of the farmers you knew and our grandpa knew.
Yeah, that was a highlight of my life. I raised my bird dogs and trained my bird dogs. And of course we hunted quail, and it was a really good thing to do.
Y'all would walk how many miles in a day, probably?
Well, usually around 10 or 12 miles we'd walk, and it wasn't like walking on the street. You'd be in the woods and that sort of thing.
So, Dad, when you were quail hunting, were there many other people quail hunting?
Not too many, maybe a couple. You didn't. It took a long time to raise the dogs and train them, and see from the time they were born, you know, you raised them up and trained them. And wasn't many people, but there wasn't probably 3 or 4 quail hunters in Baldwin County back then. It just took a long time, and not just the time, but to put your hands on them and training them and training them and training them. It just took a long time to train a bird dog.
And you saw the growth from hunting. You saw more places start becoming more populated, more houses start to be built.
Oh yeah, Baldwin County just had started growing then and growing more today. I don't know, it's just growing. I don't know how big this county's gonna get.
Now, what's the biggest, Dad, as far as the growth area, of course, down at the lower end, but what were you surprised, you know, as far as a kid seeing our area up here in North Baldwin, you know, the growth?
Yeah, well, it was like other parts of the county. I mean, people were growing in and just
Vacationers.
Yeah, and a lot of litigation up here. That's where I spent my time, was in the litigation in court in front of juries.
Tell us about when you and Mom got married, and then, you know, the family makeup, if you want to. 3 children.
Yeah, my wife's from Louisiana, Bogalusa, Louisiana, and her daddy was a lawyer over there. And she was going to, what is that women's school in New Orleans?
Newcomb, part of Tulane.
Yeah, Newcomb College. And her daddy told her if she'd make the dean's list, she was gonna make it anyway, that he would let her transfer to Alabama. So she transferred to Alabama, I guess her junior year. And then we had my oldest son. He was born in Tuscaloosa. And then we had my daughter, and then we had you. But that was the way it was in Tuscaloosa. Tuscaloosa was a little small town then. They didn't have but about 2 or 3 red lights in Tuscaloosa. It was just a little small country town.
And And at some point, Mom and you redid the office where we're sitting now, right? You want to tell the story about, and my mother, and about kind of her renovations throughout, but you want to tell about doing
Well,
that.
this was a filling station. We got some photographs back there. And I had a good friend. I didn't have any money, but I had a good friend that owned Baldwin Pole and Piling Company, Ted Easley. And we bought, this was a Trailway service station, and we bought it. And Mama redid it. And when we did it, at that time, she made it into a little restaurant. And it was a restaurant for about 2 years. And then she redid it, renovated it again, and made the law office. And we've been here ever since.
And she also renovated 2 other buildings for your offices in the county. You want to?
Yeah, one in Robertsdale and one in Fairhope. We had a law office in Robertsdale then, and then had a law office, we still do, in Fairhope. It's in another building now, but Mama renovated all of those. Well, we had the old courthouse back then, and even though it was old, you look back on it now, and people really took a lot of pride in it, and that was the main thing, was the courthouse. And we didn't have that many paved streets, but that courthouse stayed a long time, and then as the county began to grow, they remodeled it twice, but we still got those pictures of that big old courthouse, and people took a lot of pride in that.
Was there anything else that the county, like we didn't have up here that we had up here they didn't have in the, I mean, the politics were all heavily involved here.
Yeah, of course, just like statewide, I mean, politics was politics, you know, when they had all of the county officials was elected countywide, and that was a big thing back then, the elections and what have you.
I remember Grandpa talking about when Big Jim Folsom stopped in, didn't he?
Yeah. I don't remember much about that, but he was a character, you know. But Daddy met him and that sort of thing.
And then when we grew up, we had Coach Bryant stop by our house
Oh yeah.
on our way back from the senior ball.
That's a little story about Coach Bryant. He had quit making speeches at the high school organizations because he just couldn't. He didn't have time. In Baymonette, they went undefeated. Lyle Underwood and Coach James were the coaches. I wrote him a letter and, of course, mentioned that Baymonette was undefeated, which football was a big thing back then. And I think that might have been the only year, except way on back, which I wouldn't be aware of, that they were undefeated. But anyway, I got a call one day and the lady said, "Would you hold for Coach Bryant?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." We still was all scared to death of Coach Bryant when he was a coach. He was real fair, but you'd have to practice and everything. But anyway, so I picked the phone up, it rang, and nobody was there. So I put it back down and it rang again, and Coach Bryant named me Redbird. I caught some passes when I just got over there from Marion, scrimmaging against the first team, the red team, and he hollered off his tower, said, "That a boy, Redbird." And so that name stuck with me forever. But anyway, he told me, said, "Redbird," said, "I got your letter." And he said, "I'm gonna come down and speak at the banquet." My Lord, so I had to introduce him, and I wrote that speech out and memorized that thing. And so he came to the house that night. That was after he spoke. He stayed at the high school banquet to sign the last signature of anybody that wanted a signature. And so I asked him, I said, "Well, Coach, you want to come by the house?" And he said, "Well, I think I will, Redbird." And of course, it was just me, so I called Lyle and Lowell, and they came over and so they could talk football and everything. And that was a real nice evening. Those high school coaches being with Coach Bryant, and he stayed about 2 or 3 hours. In my practice, representing a lot of landowners, when the state condemned the roads, the county condemned the roads, I would represent the landowners, and they couldn't agree on the value of the land and what have you. The state was always pretty low, and of course, you know, them landowners, especially in Baldwin County, and so they'd go to court. Of course, sometimes they could reach an agreement with the landowner. I say sometimes, not. It would be a few times, but we had a lot of litigation, and I did a lot of that kind of work. And that Marion, of all the schools, I graduated from 3 schools, but that Marion Institute touches my heart. It was private back then, and we had to raise the money, and it just got tough trying to raise the money every year. So while I was not president, but chairman of the board, we got the state to take it in the junior college system. There was some controversy there, but we got it on through. But in order to do that, we had to eliminate the high school portion at Marion, but we got it on in. When I was county attorney, and we started, of course, we stopped the oil out in the Gulf, but also we just became aware of taking care of the county and the environment. It really became focused, the environment, to take care of the environment.
And parks also. I think y'all started to focus more on
parks and just everything.
They began to start seeing the growth. I mean, well, they saw the growth, but doing things to kind of prepare. Dad, so with the 2 interstates coming in, 65 and 10, and just more road improvements, what did you see happen?
Well, in the causeway, when they full-laned the causeway, it just started mushrooming over here in Baldwin County. when they opened them roads up from Mobile, they started piling out of Mobile because a lot of people didn't want to live right in the city. They wanted to get out and have a little room.
One last thing you might want to say to show the difference is, tell real briefly, Dad, tell us about in the summers, you grew up some in Point Clear, Alabama. Your dad had, or your grandfather had bought a place down there, but tell us about what the bay was like.
Mobile Bay is always on the eastern side of the Bay Sea. That's where you have the beach, and you don't have the mud in the bay. It's all that's why the eastern side of Mobile Bay, the property is a lot more valuable.
Because y'all had grass beds, you found oysters.
Grass beds and shrimp and all, but of course the bay's pretty well. You don't have too much of that now.
Did you ever go to a Jubilee?
Oh yeah.
Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, well, then you'd have to stay up about 3 nights. Say, well, they're gonna have a Jubilee, and it wouldn't come, but you done stayed up all night long, and you'd stay up, and finally, you know, they'd have a Jubilee, and you'd get some shrimp, and
One time we had a bullet Jubilee. You remember filling your truck up?
yeah.
And you remember what you did?
I always like to throw that cast net out of that, like bird hunting. I like to throw that cast net, and God knows to have that Jubilee, and you fill that cast net up, you couldn't get it out of the water hardly. You'd have to bring it to the beach and unload it.
I remember when you filled the truck up.
Yeah, and I gave a lot of fish away. That's the only place in the United States or country that has them Jubilees. And I don't know how often they have it now, but they've had some big ones, you know. And Baldwin County is it's a wonderful county. Got some wonderful people. And of course it's just mushrooming now. And I'm glad we got a good commission to get the growth handled properly.